Hello, this is Chris.
And Kevin.
I just ripped that off because that seems more natural because it's something that our guy Paul Vanderklay does here. That's the way he just, hello, this is Paul. And
Yeah.
he starts in. Paul Vanderklay, I associate him right in with Peterson because so much of the Peterson stuff I've watched over the years, I've watched it through the eyes of Paul Vanderklay,
Yeah.
which I think is kind of funny because Paul Vanderklay is he's a Calvinist. I
hmm
think I'm really bad. You might be able to sort out evangelicals better than me from your mission and stuff like that. Like
A little bit,
I cannot sort
maybe.
them out at all.
I
But
don't know. I don't know all the stuff about the CRC, but Calvinist Reformed Church.
I
Like
do not
parsing it
get
out
it at all.
between like Baptists, I even get caught up like not understanding exactly where that all sits. So anybody in the Christian world who may be tuning in, um, forgive us for that.
The way these guys get into different Christian people and Christian names and Christian
hmm
timelines, I'm sure we sound a bit like that to anybody
Yeah.
listening to Mormonism outside of it. But I don't think you need to fully understand all that so and so begat so and so begat
Yeah.
so and so to understand it. But this is a Wokal Distance. First name Mike. He reveals that in this. I don't know what his full name is, but he is a.
Paul was supposed to edit that out, but
Oh, really?
that's what he said.
Well, I've followed Vocal Distance for a long time
Yeah.
on Twitter, and he's just got a couple YouTube things, but he
hmm
mostly pops up on other people's podcasts here and there. He is, what do you call it? He's Jewish, but then
He's Jewish by birth, but he's Christian by
he's
faith.
Christian now. But it's like a type of, what's that type of Christianity? It's a weird type of
Ah,
Christianity. But I mean, I think these guys all still just kind of align and line up. Paul is a pastor for some sort of church in the San Francisco area. I do not understand the whole timeline of all that stuff. But he's got Vocal Distance on here because Paul just barely became aware of Vocal Distance. I've been aware of both of these guys the past 5, 6 years, and then
yeah.
Vocal put out several tweets this past week that were long threads of tweets, and he does this from time to time, giving large explanations of postmodernity. He's very well read in postmodern stuff.
hmm
Beyond that, he's well read in how postmodernism got purposefully folded into a lot of Christian ministries or Christian books that became all the rage and popular in the past 20 years.
hmm
And his posts this past week were all talking about some of the things that deconstruction has no end to it.
hmm
Well, actually, let's start that other little hilarious video first.
Oh yes, please.
You ready to laugh?
I don't know. I didn't laugh the first time I saw it, but
God, get better at that. It's an aggression. It's
I mean,
just,
I laughed. I laughed about it as hard as I when I laughed at Hannah Gatsby's last
that's pretty
comedy
fun.
special.
Here we go.
Construction has become some sort of sexy thing to do.
Is deconstruction sexy?
Deconstruction. Existential crisis. Was everything I believed a lie?
You want to know what? It's a TikTok
was
video and it gets old.
The rapture is not even
I
in the
need to-
Bible. Noah's Ark. How though? King James
That's
was
asking how about the Noah's Ark is deconstruction, but
all I did was ask questions. Deconstruction. But you know what?
asking questions. The part of the problem, I mean, I keep getting pedantic about this, and Wokal talks about this a lot with Paul because he agrees with me, but then he also kind of does make the point that it still is really tied to the original concept of deconstruction, but it is different. It's a colloquial version of it. But just asking questions isn't, well, it is now.
But it was all worth it because deconstruction is so sexy. The slope is slippery.
The slope is slippery. There's no slope.
I wonder if they'll get hit for copyright infringement from Giorgio or from Armani.
Yeah. So they're
Oh,
on
you
to the.
didn't finish it out though, man.
There's more.
Yeah.
Man, I've been missing out. Hold
See,
on a
well,
second.
you got to do the deconstruction part of that video or that clip.
Why did I just vanish on the screen? Do you hear me still?
Yeah, I still hear you.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a hard no.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't even catch that ever.
You gotta get the Hegelized synthesis there.
Where did I go? My camera keeps doing this. Yeah. Okie dokie. Let's get back into it.
And
so
what I
what
care
about
about
the
is
grievance
truth.
study really bothered you enough to do what you've done?
I care about truth,
Okay.
and I hate intellectual bullies.
Okay.
I hate people who make it their goal to epistemologically disempower people and to win arguments by pulling the rug of authority out from other people and say, well, you can't even have this discussion, so you'll just have to let me handle it. And then disempower them within the conversation using jargon and terminology and concepts. And then whenever they get caught, say, well, my point is more subtle than that. Have you read blah, blah, blah?
nuanced.
It's this thing that I hate. When someone says, you know, I'm not sure I agree with consubstantiation. I'm more of a transubstantiation guy myself. And they respond and say, oh, have you read chapter 14, paragraph 7 of the Summa Contra Gentiles in the original Latin? And you go, well, I haven't. Well, I don't think you're qualified to talk about this. And then trying to tear them down by embarrassing them in the conversation, by appealing. This I hate more than anything else. That's one. Two, I want the truth. I could be wrong, and I'm okay with being wrong, but I want the truth. And I hate nothing more than people who say, well, what we're doing is the truth and the truth. And then they use postmodern ideas where they apply the postmodernism to dissolve your views
To
and
rust
then
it, to rust your sword,
to
let's say.
rust your sword, to crack apart your thing. And then they arbitrarily exempt their views from the same analysis.
Yeah.
That's the essence of what modern day critical fill in the blank theory does, is deconstruction for thee and not for me. That person that we showed at the very beginning who's flopping around and says, oh, the slope is slippery. They've obviously heard some sort of criticism floating around or something,
Right.
that deconstruction, you're playing with fire. And they're joking around like, it's just questions, man. It's just some questions about the veracity of truth claims.
Yep.
And it's not. It doesn't end there. And that's what this whole podcast here, especially for people who are Christians who are trying to envelop postmodern ideas to try to make sense of it, they're playing with the fire that can only destroy. And I was telling you earlier that we were reviewing John DeLynn and Kara giving their long rant about what they hate about being the ex-Mormon space, but they described it as part of what they do is they help people deconstruct all their social constructionism, and it all falls to the floor. And then you reconstruct it from there. And the part where there's a floor, that's the part that's not there. You know?
That's true, man. That's the thing that, like, and I mean, he's gonna get into this, but yeah, I'll just let it keep going because we're gonna hit what I'm talking about in a second.
Implicit elitism that disqualifies the people down below.
Is that pretty loud to you? Let me make sure my
No,
system.
it sounds
it's all the way up.
sounds just fine.
Okay.
From actually participating, and in fact, I would say is in many ways very unchristian, because it implicitly robs all of the people who are simply participating in these structures from actually being image bearers of God, who are capable of knowing the truth, having an encounter with the truth, and all of that too. So that's part of why, even though, because of my interest in Jordan Peterson and my critique of where I saw my own denomination going and where I saw conversations going,
Part of all this is that Kevin and I, we've been interested in this a long time, but we saw Quick starting to talk and speak up about it and point to where it's really infiltrating into the Mormon world. I already knew that it was infiltrating in a tangential Mormon world and like the Sunstone world for years, which is kind of just those people who try to be academic, kind of a divinity school wannabes of Mormon theology and writings and ideas, or anything related to Mormon or its offshoots. But they've been talking about getting postmodern for a long time. In fact, I've got a clip of it. But even so, there'll be some apologists who start dabbling into postmodern ideas. And one of the things they talk about is that if you dabble into postmodernism, it's an acid without a container. It dissects all truth, dissects all identity. What modern day critical theory is trying to say, no, you can't dissect my oppressed identity, because like these guys say right here, and I think it's true of everybody, and it's true of like the generation of kids nowadays, is once you see the postmodern problem and the postmodern ideas of epistemology, it's hard to ever take those glasses back off again. Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay will show that it's like putting on the lenses and putting on the glasses, and there's the oppression
Cynical
level
glasses.
of it. But some of it is just that, as Wokal describes here, is you see through everything, and once you see through everything, you can't see anything,
Right.
because it's all just blankness. It doesn't stop. Like if you're honest about it, if you really supposedly understand the stuff, it doesn't stop. And so many ex-Mormons figure that out just in the process of it. You know, they go and deconstruct their Mormonism, and next thing you know, they're deconstructing their family, they're deconstructing their gender, they're deconstructing, but then they don't even realize it goes farther than that.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. Peterson put out a video. He's kind of talking about postmodernity, and you might notice that the LGBTQ acronym continues to keep growing.
Yeah.
Because it's, well, how many ways are we oppressed? There's oppression every which way, and we have to rank order that oppression. And the thing about it is once we get past taking out the patriarchy, hey, then who's on the chopping block? That's the question next. And it continues to go down and to find the ultimate oppression, right?
Yeah, it's where you get that Nietzschean like ressentiment, you know, the whole concept of the morality gets flipped inverse, and the oppressed becomes the top of the hierarchy, because the reason, it's not just because, boy, we should put the marginalized people up front. It's because they actually think that that's the only base level of a thing that can be the floor.
And
like
if
that's
you're
the thing that can just be true, and it's the
if
only
you're at-
identity that.
If when the hierarchy flips and you're at the top of it, I mean, I can tell you right now, I don't think that the person at the top of those hierarchies are really full of a whole lot of real benevolence. That
No.
they're going to treat people with fairness and kindness and that kind of thing.
There's
Because it's
also
all
the level.
cynicism. It's all cynicism.
It's all cynicism, and they're the ones that announced through their Foucauldian theory that these guys mentioned again, and we've mentioned 1,000 times, you don't have to be fully read and inculcated to have picked it up in the zeitgeist, you know, but if it's all power, then it's all just power. Like you've already announced, you've already said what your game is.
Right.
And you have to stop and think about that and say, wait a minute, if it is all power, what's the other side of that? What's the side of that you don't want to just say, okay, it's all power gonna do?
Yeah, Wokal says that in this. When you have those cynical like glasses on and you see everything, oh, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. You want to have a family, huh? So you want to oppress women and put them in a patriarchal structure of a family and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, I just want to have a family. As a married guy with 6 kids, I can tell you right now that the thing that gives me the greatest meaning in my life is my family. Like that's who I live for. It really is. And that's all I want.
Yeah, there's part of that deconstruction is, you can say any sort of desire that you hope for or want is just a power struggle. Every interaction, down to every single little interaction you have in this world, is just that. And then you can get to a point where you're just dissecting yourself to death because you can get to feeling so guilty about that. Once again, like I'll point to Jonathan DeLin's most recent podcast where they're talking about what they hate about being in the Mormon world, and in the latter half of it, you can hear him just start, you know, lashing himself for being a white male. And should I not have a space and all that sorts of stuff? And they ultimately come to the conclusion like it's okay for me to be here, because you're gonna come to that conclusion. But if you were an actual postmodernist and you know that the other postmodernists who are dissecting you, who are probably the bigger critics that you're dealing with than me, are actually saying no, you do not get to make money and be in this space and not be an infernal hypocrite. I might not get to it because I can't remember every single thing I clipped. But he talks in this a little bit about, it's Foucault and Derrida, but frequently the quote that you're quoting is somebody like Judith Butler or something like that. It especially happened in post-colonial theory. What's her name? I can never say her name. Spivak. They purposefully, this lady quoted everything from Foucault, and now everybody within that post-colonial theory only quotes her when quoting Foucault.
So it's the whole
because they needed to erase Foucault.
It's the whole telephone game.
It's not just telephone. It's part of the deconstruction. They couldn't have it come from Foucault.
So
they couldn't have it come from a white European male anymore.
Yeah, right. We have to frame it through a different lens now.
And erase the white European hegemonic male.
Well, and that's what's gonna, you pointed out a lot. We don't have to say a whole lot, Lynn. Like, I mean, we're not here to be Lynn critics. It's just he's just kind of low hanging fruit. And he sets himself up to be, but the thing about it is ultimately this is going to catch up to him and be his. If anything is his demise, it's going to be this. It's going to be
there's so much like strange judo in this stuff. Flip and I talked about, and I haven't posted yet, but we talked a little bit about how, as much as the ex-Mormons gnashed their teeth about the Mormon religion having money, that very money might be what affects them. It might be what brings them to the position that their opposition wants them to be in. And so they should stop gnashing their teeth about it. They should be like, give those Mormons more money and have them more tied to ESG scores,
Yeah.
But the flip end of that too is like, we can criticize Lynn all we want that he mouths and plays the game and tries to tap dance like a monkey for these worldviews. We can say, like, if we want Lynn gone, we can say, yeah, keep doubling into that, Lynn. You know what I mean? Like, go with it. That'll deconstruct you faster than we'll ever deconstruct you.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing. They want to dip their toes into the ideology just enough to make things convenient, to skate out of, I don't know, whatever it is. I think a lot of times it's responsibility, you know what I mean? Skate out of an inconvenient responsibility that's tied to, say maybe
social pressures, social construction.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Social construction, like these people whining and complaining that we live in a society, what I mean? We're not going to get outside of that, I heard Doug Wilson talk about it earlier today too. This can even include us, but it's just true, is that like you have 12 clowns out on a circus stage out there honking their noses, and some guy gets up there on the stage with them and starts talking about it from a meta level, from like hey, these clowns are doing this and that. All the audience see is just a 13th clown. And that's all there is to it. Nobody's outside of it, and you're not gonna get outside of it. They say everything's just social construction, and I will say everything is social construction, but nothing is just social construction. Like, it's all mixed with both reality, biology, and social construction. There's no escaping either end of it. But the people who want to call it just social construction, they both want to say it's all only that, so it can be removed and engineered, and I, as the critic, can stand outside of it. No, you cannot.
Yeah.
And you don't. This is coming to one of my favorite lines of the whole thing.
Even though I was expected to be a good progressive NPC, I stopped saying what was supposed to be said, which of course caused everybody else in the choir to look at me and say, no, you're...
I like how you use the choir, because like there was like such a time frame that one of the popular words to say when you told somebody some truth that they didn't want to hear, they'd say, you're being tone deaf. You're being tone deaf saying this thing. Yeah, but it's true. Yeah, but you're tone deaf. But it's true. I don't care what
That's one of those plays that they use to delegitimize what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's them trying to
I know.
put social construction on your head when they're the ones acting like, oh, we should be
And
able to dance around outside of that.
And assert power.
Oh, yeah.
So because I want to say, hey, wait a minute, let's stop with the NPCing a minute and maybe do some actual conversation with each other.
Yeah.
The NPC thing, I think everybody knows what it is nowadays, but it's just saying non-playable character from a video game, and you just get downloaded with the proper ways to act in the world, just to run over that. But I just wanted to mention, I've been watching Paul for a long time, and I've even joked at him with this, and he's answered it, is the way he says conversation drives me crazy. And he says conversation. It's got the Z in it. But
I'm always thinking of Benjamin Boyce's conversations.
Conversation, yeah, that irritates me too. But you can get irritated by people you like a lot.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure we're doing something irritating.
I brought it up to him because he was talking about somebody else saying a word that irritated him because it was said wrong, and it was like, yeah, conversation.
And let's participate instead of just being a part of a choir.
Yeah. I what happens is is we get an idea, and the idea gets escape velocity from its use and becomes an identity. I used to say, when back in the days when it was, William Lane Craig versus Christopher Hitchens, I used to say that there was a lot of atheists that identified as rational. Like, rationality was an identity. It wasn't that they were rational people that were careful, thoughtful thinkers. It's that they identified as rational.
That's the line. And that's something I've been trying to say for years, especially in the post-Mormon community, is that no, you did not graduate into rationality because you left a church. And I'll even go, let's go down the road with you and say that it's only rational to be atheist, right? Let's play that game with you. You still didn't graduate into rationality. You're like, because like if we're giving you the gold star, that one, yeah, sure, faith isn't rational, so fine, we give you the gold star that you're more rational than all faith people in the world. No, you still didn't graduate into being a rational person. You don't get to like say, I've got a PhD, put it on my wall, man. I left a religion, I'm irrational now. Dan Dennett would kind of call it the Brights because people left or something like that. And I liked Dan Dennett, but that was one of the more condescending things that he'd always say that I always hated from the first time he ever said it. But no, I don't think there's any level of winning or not winning on one side or the other, of atheist or not atheist, of who's rational or not. And there's for sure irrationality inside of religion. There's irrationality outside of religion. But one of the problems with the modern science world right now, people think if they cock their heads back and yell science that they're doing science. And it's the same thing as if you think you cock your head back and yell, I'm rational, that you're a rational person. Nobody's 100% rational. That's the bottom line of it. But
except for Bill Nye.
we can all do it for minutes at a time or bits at a time, you know what I mean? But nobody wins like the rationality. And that's so much of like Peterson's Freudian points that he makes. Not to say the credit people don't give to Freud that they should give to Freud is him saying that you're not always in control of your own brain perfectly. Jonathan Haidt describes it as we're all riding an elephant of emotion, and we only decide or try to redefine ourselves as having acted rationally after the point all the way through. You mentioned it, you pointed out, and I didn't even notice it. And then when I noticed it, I was like, ugh, because I hate that stuff. Is in the RFM and the Radio Free Mormon debate, he kept saying, it's like, I graduated out of,
yes,
like it's some superior position or something like that. And I, as somebody who's left it or whatever, hate that construal. I hate it, and I've always hated it. Anything to say on that one?
I always thought when I was in college, any professor that acted like I'm smarter than you and you don't have anything on me, instantly lost credibility. And I think that it happens a lot with intellectuals. You know what I mean? Not everybody. I think that the people who are the smartest are those who master something parenting will teach you this. You'll have a 6-month-old child who can't even talk, and they teach you something. You know what I mean? You have to be humble. You can't be too wise in your own eyes. That's, to me, is a great truth. Whether you're a believer or not, like, you can always learn from people who are not quite as on the level you're at. But I just learned a certain mindset a long time ago that I can't remember who said it, but it stuck with me, that everybody's my superior in at least one way.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter who they are. You know what I mean? So
for sure.
you get caught up in thinking that you're wise. That hubris is going to lead to your downfall. That's what the scripture says.
Yeah, one of the concepts, I mean, Gadsad always says it, but I've heard other people talk about it, is that holding on to epistemic humility at all times is, in a weird way, it seems like the postmodernists should be asking for that, but there's not. There's like an arrogance in it. There's an arrogance in that I can just rip away, like he's talked about in the beginning. Like, I hate these intellectuals who just get a joy out of feeling like they can rip apart any sort of a truth or truth telling that people have in the world. And the whole essence of what you and I are poking at is that we can play the game too. The game can get played back at you. It's infinite. And well, I guess we got more of that. It's coming up.
Because postmodernism deconstructs all the frameworks, it's not to say that nobody builds another framework. No. It's just that framework eventually gets deconstructed by somebody else.
Yep. Fast forward to here.
If you use evangelicalism as a term defined by theological convictions, you can't turn around then and say this community isn't being defined by theological convictions, because then you have simply lost the frame in which.
That's a bit of my thing of saying to Mormon apologists, like, be careful with putting postmodernism into your theological descriptions. Just stick with it, that it's faith, and you're and trying to like make it make sense, like, through these postmodernist concepts.
That's the thing. And like, as I've come to understand postmodernism, I'm certainly not versed like you are, but I understand for the most part what it is. I understand that the acid and the cynical, the cynical lenses that it produces, but like, it's kind of pushed me back into like, you know what? I just have to go back to that it's faith, and that there is a little bit of magic about it.
Yeah.
And to be quite frank, I'm okay with that.
Well, I think that's because as I've talked about with some like philosophers, you go all the way down the road with like analytic philosophers, it starts getting it just as weird as it does in postmodern stuff.
Right.
And that just kind of gets more weird in that they so technically try to map out every part of reality that you realize that it starts falling apart.
Right.
You realize that at the bottom of any one of those points, there's shiftiness at the bottom of it too, to give a point to the postmodernists, Mm-hmm. But as Wokal Distance points out in this, which is kind of the point of the pragmatist that Peterson always points to, is that crashing into reality. He talks about it like if you're floating out to sea in the dark, running into the rocks is where you figure out where you are. A lot of people's guiding lights through floating out in that dark through history has been a faith.
Well, yeah, let me just put that pragmatically to me, just in the Book of Mormon. One of the first things that's talked about in the Book of Mormon is the iron rod and the mists of darkness. What gives you bearing when you're in that mist of darkness? You got to have something that you're holding on to.
Yeah, it just is true as like so many of like the atheist types, like even myself, that I want it to be true, or Sam Harris wants it to be true, is that they hope, and this is something I gave up hope for a long time ago. I don't know why Sam still holds on to it, that, oh, we've dropped religion and we did just graduate into rationality, and now we're all just going to make the wise, smart decisions and just follow our mental faculties to guide ourselves through these dark waters. But it all just turns into a big scattered mess of people scattering around, bumping each other, crashing each other, and crashing into rocks.
Yeah.
And there's a part of it where it's happening at such a societal level that I have a feeling, and it's one of the reasons I was talking with Flip yesterday, because it's not out yet, so I have to repeat it now, is the reason I come at Delenn so hard is I honestly think that he does lead people into a dark and dreary wilderness or whatever, and crashing into rocks is at the end of that, but that can happen at a fractal level, not just an individual person's thing. Maybe for some individual person, going and venturing out into that darkness and seeing where it leads you, and even crashing on the rocks and building off of that's fine. But when it happens at the big fat level of a whole society, whoa, you know, we don't want to live through that.
Nope.
And we might just get to, thanks to these types of things.
Yep.
Right? Like it's just so easy.
Yeah.
It's just so easy. But there's a deeper point here. It's that
He's talking about the deconstruction's easy, and I think you and I we were talking about deconstruction is easy and constructing is hard. And so like you can even on a postmodern level say it's all narratives, and deconstructing or constructing is all narrative, but the point is they're not the same thing. Like constructing a meaningful narrative is nowhere near as easy as just ripping one down.
Well, this is why you have a hard time converting plumbers and roofers and framers and to postmodern ideology.
Yeah.
Because for me, this is kind of what has inoculated my worldview, because I grew up learning how to build stuff. That's what I do now. I'm a builder. And the thing about it is, you're going toward that. I'm hoping you're going toward that clip where he talks about foundations and stuff like that. Obviously, we've gotten into like postmodernism has seeped into all the arts and all that kind of stuff. But where it has a really hard time taking grasp is that you truly can't. You can do it with music, but it doesn't make sense. Like atonal music comes out, and who wants to listen to atonal music for more than 5 seconds? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
There's
works
no
no
like
meaning
some
to
horror
it.
scenes and stuff like that.
But where it gets to be completely impossible is within architecture.
Yeah.
You cannot make a postmodern building. I mean, they do have modern architecture, but it's all, we're gonna make this building look cool, but it still has to stand up, and it still has to meet code, and it still has to withstand some vibrations
follow
in the
some
earth.
rules. It's still got to follow a meta narrative.
Absolutely. And how about this? Try to make postmodern highways and streets and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, you have to have some order, because all like if you take the deconstruction road all the way to the end, and it, like you said, if you'll take it to a certain maybe Delenn takes it to a certain level, somebody else is going to take it to the next, and somebody else is going to take it to the next, just like you've painted out.
And they're going to take it to the next, and they're going to take it at Delenn. Well, we technically are doing that. And
it's not.
He's getting it worse. He's getting it worse from the real deal postmodernists.
And
we're just pointing out that we can use this on you. There are the real deal people using it on them.
Right. Well, that's the thing is we're in kind of this Mormon paradigm, but outside of that Mormon paradigm, even outside of that post-Mormon paradigm, there's this gulf, this gulf that if you continue to keep going, floating out into the sea, you're just going out into meaninglessness. That's why the ultimate, logical conclusion is always going to be a nihilistic nothingness.
Yeah. The reason I got into bodybuilding and stuff like that is first couple years outside of leaving the church, I got into a moment of realizing, this is long before any of these sorts of meeting people, long before Peterson or whatever, that I realized that the people I was hanging around, everything was just too much criticism. It was just too critical all the time, that we just all felt like we were just sitting around criticizing stuff. And I decided that I just had to choose something almost in a Petersonian way before Peterson and just aim upwards, just see if I could just do this thing, because I'm just tired of the criticize. And I was in that boat too. I mean, I can still be in that boat. Anybody, we can all fall into it. Even this is kind of like a level of criticize.
Yeah.
But the only thing that ever really is hard and interesting to do is construct. And the deconstructions to me are boring and old hat, as Helen Pluckrose puts.
Well, yeah.
Like, this stuff's all old. Why do we go around acting like it's the new progressive way to be? It's all as old as any old thing. Which is one of the things Vanderklay points out, pulling his biblical references, or something like Victor Davis Hanson will pull out, talking about his classicist stuff, is this stuff that both sides of this is as old as time. You're not being new.
Oh. Well, I pointed out, to you, like, my wife and I, we do a lot of home renovation projects, and we kind of geek out, like, watching, like, the whole Chip and Joanna Gaines Fixer Upper stuff, right? Don't like totally skewer me for that. But anyway, the thing about it is, when you watch that show, like, Chip's pretty funny. I actually like the guy quite a bit, and he always geeks out on like his favorite day is demo day. I'm gonna, and in 6 to 12 hours, they're able to demo a house ready for renovation, and then it takes them, 6 weeks to be able to build something that looks cool.
Yeah.
So,
did you ever see that? I think I've shared this with you.
Donald Trump. I voted for Trump because I thought he'd create a better America for everyone. But after reading 800 or so pages on queer feminist theory, I realize now just how much I've been duped. You gotta understand, I come from a small steel town in Pennsylvania. If I had known the foundational texts on intersectional theory, I would have never chanted, "Lock her up, lock her up." Lock her up, lock her up. We were told Hillary Clinton was the enemy, but it's clear now that the true enemy is a patriarchal, capitalistic society that maintains its ascendance by making powerful and ambitious women appear threatening, only to protect my status in a system purposefully designed to benefit cishet white men like myself. Jesus.
That's in 2017.
I know, but man, it aged so well.
Yeah. At that time, it was almost like talking like that was still almost a little bit too obscure for people to follow. And now almost anybody could follow that.
Yeah.
Like, when I saw that back then, I thought it was funny back then. It almost wasn't worth sharing around because people kind of didn't quite understand that terminology and what they were getting at yet, unless they were in Ivy League world. But it's not because this stuff is smart, just like Wokal Distance says. It's because it's just obscure and pedantic.
Right. And esoteric.
Yeah. Back to that.
Because of the methods that she's adopted, nothing stops it. I think she seriously believes that she's like, we're going to hold on to our orthodoxy. No, because here's what's going to happen. The people who pick your book up are going to adopt that, and
there's some fluff here.
They're going to apply that to, like, the Westminster Confession. There was a recent tweet, a guy was...
So he's talking about how the postmodernism doesn't work inside of trying to make sense of the religion and stuff. So people were talking about post-colonial stuff inside of one of his longer threads is talking about you guys thinking that you can do your liberation theology and deconstruct stuff all the way down. There's no way for it to not also deconstruct. Like, if you say it's got to be something that's coming from people of color voices or something like that, well, the people of color voices can also just be deconstructed as people who are talking as puppets for the white cishet male patriarchy.
Well, and you've already seen this happen. So it's like, when did they decide to branch off and cancel out Asians out of people of color? You know what I mean? That's the thing, is it's like, in the beginning, it didn't start out that way, but then they ended up getting to the point where you know what? They actually they're actually white adjacent. So we're going to take them out, and then we're going to create the acronym BIPOC.
Well, then he mentions that like somebody like Kanye, Michael Eric Dyson calls him like white, or what was it? The guy from California.
The ventriloquism.
Yeah, the guy from California who was running for governor. What was his name? Larry Elder.
Oh,
And there was that article in the LA Times that say Larry Elder is the new face of white
Yeah.
supremacy and stuff like that. But
The black face of white supremacy.
you can always like do stuff like that, but you can even get more creative than that, or even just like wait a little bit and somebody will kind of even create some different way to dissect something up, you know?
Right.
Creed, all white males, done.
Yeah, there's
Done.
no
Gone.
question.
There's no stopping point.
That includes you, Delenn and Larson, out. No
And me
stopping
too.
point.
There's no
Done.
question that this game is full of cheap tricks that anyone can wield. And
But
you know,
there's a
that was-
deeper point.
Okay, so I'd like to hear that.
The deeper point is this. This is a patriarchal example. We have 4 men on a construction site, and they're going to eat lunch. So one man finds one of the buckets, those big buckets, flips it over, sits down. Another guy picks up a bucket, flips it over, sits down. Third guy picks up a bucket, flips it over, sits down. Reaches over, grabs one of the other bucket, turns it over and says to the fourth guy, come here, grab a chair. Now, that bucket was a bucket 5 seconds ago. Now it's turned into a chair. And you think, well, how did that happen? Was there some essence of bucketness in the bucket that when he turned it over, slithered out into the universe and was replaced by an essence of chairness? No. Was there some structure within the molecules that was chairful or chair-ish that inserted itself? Well, no. Chair just refers to, in that comment, chair just means the things that we happen to be sitting on. So it could be like a bucket. It could be this orange amplifier sitting here. See, I could sit on one of those, and that could be a chair. I'm being convicted now because it's like you're showing off. Don't show off your amplifiers.
You hipster.
Don't be proud.
Orange are nice amplifier.
I know. I'm just.
Paul just says that that's nominalism, and that's getting back to Plato, because it all comes from Plato and trying to decipher what the essence of things are. But you and I were talking about doing a street epistemology role play on each other and making each other question what on earth a chair is.
Yeah.
In this same sort of role. And so much stuff throughout philosophy, throughout the ages, not just with the postmodernists, goes back to realizing that it's very, very difficult actually to land on any sort of thing that's truth, because we're always doing these metaphysical interpretations of the world that are around us and seeing uses of things in things that aren't necessarily there. It's just part of our the ways our minds are constructed. You know?
I'm
The
not an
recliner that's
amplifier
right
guy.
Is the floor a chair when I sit on it? So what are the boundaries? And so what that's gonna mean is
You do that street epistemology thing and be like, Kevin, so you feel pretty confident. You okay if I poke around at some of your axioms right now? I mean,
Sure.
I don't.
Yes, please.
I want to give you forewarning that you might start questioning all in existence, but this could be fun for us. Is that something you'd like to do across the next couple weeks?
Sure. Yes, I would like that very much.
Really? I was going to. I wanted to talk to you about it because I wanted to make sure that you knew beforehand that you could stop and realize that you're a complete idiot. You know, you're okay with.
Sure. Whatever you say. Whatever you say.
Yeah. So I just want to talk, and I don't want to make it sound like you're going to be sure of your worldview at the end of this, because you're not going to be. But
As long as I can drive my chair to the liquor store.
okay, so I have your consent to make you realize that you're just wrong on everything. Okay, right? So what confidence level do you say you have that you're sitting on a chair right now?
I'm pretty sure right now.
What makes you sure that you're on a chair? What about your chair?
Well, I
lets you
guess
know
I
that
guess
it's
it's a
that it's
couch.
chairness.
I guess it's a couch.
So there's some sort of difference between a couch and a chair. What makes you what could you describe like a chair for me? Like why are you sure that's a chair?
Well, I guess it would have four legs on it.
So
Maybe
you're saying to
three.
me, let me get this straight. I want to repeat back to you your claim in your own words and see if you're able to agree with me how I'm putting it. You feel a chair is something that has four legs, right? A
Yeah.
chair has four legs.
Yeah.
How
I think
confident
that's
are
pretty-
you? How confident are you that?
Well, I'm pretty confident, but I guess it could. I guess it could. I guess it doesn't have to have four legs.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can you think of a time where you've seen a chair that does not have four legs?
Yes.
So you're saying a chair doesn't necessarily have four legs? Like that's not part of the description of a chair.
I guess so.
Are you okay? I have about 750 more questions along that line.
Let me clear my
What's your
schedule.
confidence level now that you know what a chair is? Yeah, that's just the
Now I'm 0% confident.
It is my whole entire point with that, and that really goes all the way down the rabbit hole if
Yeah.
you've ever gotten into like studying the nominalism stuff, because it's like, what if how much of the chair do I have to take away before it's no longer a chair, and
Yeah.
all that sorts of stuff, but the point of it is like, if you're the one doing the criticism or you're the one gouging at the ideas, you're at the easy place. You're at the
Right,
point.
yeah.
And if you're the one who's trying to say, no, I know what a chair is, you're at the hard place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of say, like, when you're taking these debates and stuff, if the inherent portion of the debate is you're defending truth, I'm not,
Yeah.
you're already in an uphill, impossible battle. That's where the concept of critical theory comes from. Is they believe that they can criticize our way to utopia.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started hearing critical theory when I was younger, and not kind of knowing it was like a thing unto itself, just saying it's critical theory, and it sounded strange to me to talk about, like, put those two words together as if it was a thing, you know what I mean? And asking in because when I went into like critical theory classes of books, I'm like, so what, we're just going to sit and read this book and say, I liked it, I didn't like it, thumbs up for me, thumbs down for me, you know? And I didn't realize it was, no, we're going to deconstruct it, you know?
Right.
And
One thing, I mean, I think we missed it, but there's one key phrase that he says in there that kind of hit me, was that people, I think he was saying that the people mistakenly look at deconstruction as mastery.
yeah,
Like you master something. No, you're not mastering it.
I master breaking stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just because you can burn your house down doesn't mean you should.
I don't know if we'll hit it either with all the stuff we talk about, but they also get into this about how it's a magic trick, and once you see the magic trick, it loses its magic really quick.
Yeah.
You might get like pretty impressed and like have seen something in the past, like this was a deconstructed version of a superhero movie.
Right.
This person just deconstructed this Bible verse right here, or this person, and then like now that the whole world, there was a time frame. Like I remember 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, watching people, even people in the ex-Mormon community, go and do this sort of thing and kind of like keep mum under the word that they knew they were doing this thing, and they were acting like they were some sort of brilliant wizard in the middle of it. Right. And if you were somebody who already knew the game and saw it happen, you just were thoroughly unimpressed with it. Mm-hmm. But once anybody and everybody, because like almost all of society is getting to the point now that we're all deconstruction, going back to the original, the video we watched at the beginning of this, it's enough where people are sitting around making these memes about, I'm a deconstructor. And we know that so much of the ex-Mormon community is talking about, we're here to do some deconstruction.
Yeah.
It's going to lose its magic because everybody's going to know what it is.
Yeah.
And it's going to get old real fast. I mean, it's already old to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
Right.
There is no thing, no linchpin that holds in place the meaning of the word chair.
I think we probably wrapped that concept up.
Let's look at something here, Chris. One of the first, really prominent works of postmodern architecture is the Venturi house. So the 5-room house stands about 30 feet tall. It has a monumental front facade. It's built so that it'll have certain parts that are massively, and then like a little tiny window to juxtapose that. And it's built so that to demonstrate that the architecture, that nothing in the architecture is absolutely necessary. Nothing in the architecture is required. There is no essential thing, that the architecture can be whatever you want it to be. So it doesn't have to have a use. Yeah. It doesn't need to have a purpose. So the postmodernists made it so that you can build the building however you want. You can make it as tall as you want, as short as you want. You can have any purpose you want or no purpose at all. You can put the staircases anywhere. You can make the windows as big or small. Nothing needs to have a purpose. Nothing needs to follow any rules at all. We can break them all. And they did that with everything. But I will put money down that, you know what they didn't do that with? The foundation. Because just like your epistemology, the foundation is the place where what you're building meets the world. And if the place where what you're building meets the world isn't on a solid foundation, it's going to fall apart and crumble. And that is what postmodernism does. It is a house that is built on sand.
So I realized there is one explanation that I know of a postmodern building. Guess where it's at, Chris?
where?
It's in 1 Nephi chapter 8 when it talks about the great and spacious building, which hath no foundation, appeared as it was floating in the air.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
Coincidental?
It is a pretty amazing little bit of imagery for its time frame, for danger.
Right.
Playing out in certain ways, people getting lost and drifting around in the wilderness, and there's other people up in this big dumb
and they're jeering and making fun of everybody,
jeering and making fun, and they don't realize they're
trying
standing
to be
up,
humble and just find their right way,
and they're just
life.
unaware that there's no foundation in
right.
in the thing that they're standing on. But it's pretty impressive, pretty Nostradamus-like, if you ask me. Or what would be another word for that? Like
prophetic
or something. Yeah. So, let's jump to, I think, some of these other points we made. I'll jump to here because some of these things we kind of already said it, but people can go hear how these guys worded it better, but we've already kind of said it. And let's jump to some of this.
I live on Twitter. Oh, good. But part of what my goal has been in this little corner of the internet is to disarm these spirits. And I think that's really what you're doing with your explanations. You're working to expose the spirits and say, oh, this little hermeneutic of suspicion, this is a very old, very cheap trick that you can actually, this thing is like an unreliable guard dog that will turn on its master. That's what this is.
I like that little bit of imagery too.
Yeah, totally.
And a bit of what John DeLynne's entire tortured 3 hours of, oh, it's so hard being in this post-Mormon community, hurt people. Mm-hmm. It is because the guard dog is going to turn on you.
Mm-hmm. Let's just give Cujo a nice pet.
Cujo will get you.
Yeah, just give him a treat. Just give him a treat.
He won't bite me because I'm oppressed.
Yeah.
4 years with those who have gotten to the bottom of the glass and despaired.
So but Paul and Jonathan Pageau and all these people, even through the Peterson world, there's so many of them who did come through postmodernism and got all the way to the other side of it. These guys talk a bit about getting through construction, and there's kind of sort of a deal of like, even if you're going to get through it, you do have to go through it. There's no going back. And I talked about that a little bit with some of like the kayfabe people when I was talking with Marty, that there's people who want to just like, let's pretend to go back to the traditional times. Let's pretend to go back to the pre-modern. There's no going back. You got to go through it. And you got to realize and know and understand what it is there. But you also have to get back to something authentic. It's got to be authentic. And the Midnight Mormons asked me about it. It's not out yet, but they talked to me and they said, doesn't somebody who sees all this, doesn't there have to be somebody at the front leading all this stuff who's just like an actual believer and believing all this stuff? And I've talked with you a lot about that yeah, I think so, you know. Mm-hmm. I think it does have to have somebody who really believes at the top of it, not somebody who's doing a wrestling, you know, a version of a WWE wrestling fake belief.
The thing is think about it, man. Like, when did you figure out WWF wrestling was not real? How old were you, Chris?
Probably older than is embarrassing to say about it, but it's probably like 13, 12, 13.
You were.
I was a fan of it, but I thought they were really hitting each other, but.
The thing is like, I have to say, you grew up in a little bit more of a straight-laced Mormon home than I did.
Yeah.
Just in context, I kind of grew up as, you know, we went to church all the time. We never stopped going, even through, like, you know, even though we had a coffee maker in my kitchen and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I grew up somewhat. I kind of jokingly say that I grew up Jack Mormon. You know what I mean? But we still always went. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Like when you kind of paint picture of your youth, you seem so much more innocent than I was. Because when I was about like 5, I figured out, what the heck? They're not even hitting each other, you know. And so my point is that kids aren't stupid, right? Kids are smart. Like, and I can tell you that.
Yeah, I was still kid age when I figured it out.
Yeah,
but,
for sure. But what I'm getting at is that, like, kids can see through, and Peterson, you know, talks about this a lot. Kids see through the fakeness, man. So if kids who are little adults, you know, and who haven't quite made it there yet, can figure that kind of crap out, then why would you follow somebody who is faking it all the time?
And I think it's the downfall, the hubris of all this is that the future generations are going to, and they already are starting to look at this as the new orthodoxy. When I was criticizing John Larson, what's this orthodoxy that you say I subscribe to? And I know that he doesn't dare to talk out against it if he sees it, but I promise, like, maybe his kids are into it, but the future kids are going to stop and say, wait, what? Like, it's going to crash into the rocks, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
This is the reconstruction that we are experiencing, and it is not a dismissal that there are evil social constructs, or that also I'm a Calvinist, so that in fact all social constructs that I participate in are tainted with evil. I'm not a skeptic that racism is, you know, permeates our institutions, and that men quickly and willingly grab towards all sorts of things in order to have supremacy in their endemic struggle over women, and vice versa. None of that I'm uncomfortable with. But all of this is to imagine that it isn't merely all of these things in the way that I think you described very well, that there is no bottom. And
that's right.
The challenge, and so, you know, say what we got from Jordan Peterson is his attempt to say there are tells in the universe of a bottom. There, even though I think you said it very nicely at the beginning with Nietzsche, that now suddenly we are disoriented because we can no longer see the stars to navigate by. So how will we navigate?
You're going to get hit by reality.
Well, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
Reality is the thing that you run into when your beliefs are false. And when you run aground on the nihilism, what happens when all your instruments, when the lights go out and you lose your instruments and the night comes and your compass doesn't work and your anchor and you're adrift at sea? You find out where you are when you crash on the rocks. That's where I'm here.
I think the tells of the universe, and we watched, I don't know if I showed it to you, but the street epistemology guy talked to a Mormon kid who is a philosopher, and he's getting into epistemology of philosopher. And in the very video, the guy admits that the street epistemology isn't formal epistemology very much. This kid's a PhD candidate.
What? Doogie Howser?
Yeah. And
The kid's
in
like
epistemology, he kind of gives a bit more of a description. I'd say it's somewhat like Paul Vanderklay was describing there. That there's tells in the universe, looking for the foundations, and there's so many of when you dissect stuff down to the foundations, and it turns out to be all fuzzy, and where it ends up not being fuzzy, and where it crashes into reality, and where certain things survive and don't survive, because it's going to come out with the Midnight Mormons that I talked to them about evolutionary arguments for religion, or even like a high demand religion. And there's all sorts of concepts in it of how that stuff helps navigate reality, even a high demand religion, better than a whole society that just kind of wanders away into their own truths. And it gets weak and it gets dissected. And this has happened over and over and over and over again. And part of what the religious stories tell us are the cycle of pride, or the concept that this thing happens over and over and over and over again. You know,
Yep.
And that's even on the secular side of stuff. It happens in the Greek literature. You know, it happens in everything. So,
Well, I mean, we kind of, I don't know. Hopefully, this is kind of leading toward where you're wanting to go. But I kind of asked Chris earlier. I'm like, how many stories are out there? Are there of something that somebody invents, like a machine or something like that, and once they turn the machine on, they can't turn it off, and it ends up like going to their demise. Well, the ultimate story is what? Frankenstein, right? Like you were saying.
yeah, that's that. I mean, I don't know if that's original. I'm sure it's in the Greek too, if you think about it.
Yeah,
But like, there's got to be Pandora's box. Man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Frankenstein's that concept, but we've seen it in all sorts of movies, like The Incredibles, or it was even just in The Eternals recently that you put this being in the world that's just supposed to learn and figure out weaknesses, and that when that being figures out weaknesses, I mean, that's the story of what the monsters in The Eternals are.
Right.
Not that that's a good movie or anything, but they're beings that just continue to evolve, figuring out weaknesses.
Right.
It's actually one of the concepts of the bad guys in the Cobra Kai season right now. You know, just people who just sit there and focus and figure out weaknesses, but then sooner or later you get your own weaknesses exposed. You know, this was a Sunstone 2019 Sunstone, and this is a believing guy who went to divinity schools, and he gives this whole long description of how Mormons, you know, maybe 100 years or 60, 70 years ago, started going to the divinity schools and getting invited into them. And then they started bringing back their modern concepts from divinity schools. And they all kind of, even by bringing the modernism in it, start to dissect the religion, because the religion is a little bit of a pre-modern way of viewing things. And then the modernism always leads to postmodernism. This is one of the critiques of the modern stuff that, like, I try to hold on to modernism and Enlightenment values, but one of the main critiques of it that's true is that it leads to postmodernism. That's all there is to it. Even like the early modernists have stuff that really starts sounding postmodern if you get far down into their philosophies. And this guy, of course, goes to this divinity school, and then he starts trying to make logical sense of the stuff, and then he comes back. This isn't like full apologism, but at the same time he's going to Sunstone and talking about this stuff, and he's trying to weave in full postmodernism, just like the people Wokal Distance was criticizing, into believing Mormonism.
So I thought that I would make all of this a little bit more complicated, but in a really superficial way. Okay, so indulge me a little bit to talk about this other trend here of postmodernism. That is the tradition which comes to reject many of the claims of the Enlightenment, or at least is critical in some ways of the Enlightenment. Okay, what in the heck is postmodernism? It's a term we hear. It's often used as an insult, okay? We don't know what it means, okay? And part of the reason we don't know what it means is because there is no single definition of it. It rejects essentialist definitions in itself, and so therefore you can't even define it. Okay. But I think that we can maybe say a few things about it, that it rejects notions of a single objective truth, the binaries that structure many ideas about, say, race or gender, or the idea of a stable self, or the notion of a nation altogether, or the notion of human nature. Okay? These are all things that postmodernists spend a lot of time thinking about. And instead, they emphasize values like plurality, fragmentation, contingency, construction of human knowledge and experiences, and so on. Okay, is that clear? Everybody knows what postmodernism is? Okay, perfect.
Well, I mean, he gives a crappy thing in postmodernism, and we probably got to start wrapping up rather than go. But this whole entire talk starts leaning into saying Mormons should start leaning into postmodernism, and they have in other areas.
The whole world has.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
we live in a postmodern world now, so
I'm just going to play this little blurb of what the Sunstone deconstructionists think about his long appeal to start grabbing onto postmodernism in Mormonism.
That was remarkably well suited for this crowd. Thank you. Okay.
It's well suited for the crowd of deconstructionists that you went and preached your divinity school, adding in your postmodernism. But it's not just those guys at Sunstone. It's happening a little bit. Jonathan Streeter put up a video of this fair thing. I'll just show the screen of it real quick. In this clip here, they talk a little bit and they get into postmodern arguments to try to describe essence versus, it's kind of more phenomenological, but postmodernism comes out of phenomenology. They use Searle and Heidegger to talk about why people are their essence but not their being, and their being and not their doing, and that sorts of stuff. They start kind of making those arguments that gets, like, a lot of postmodernism is saying nothing's essential, there's no essentialism, but these guys kind of use it to deconstruct homosexual essentialism. Like, I'm essentially a homosexual. Like, no, that's not your essence. And they start using the postmodernism to deconstruct homosexuality. And that's one of the things that other guy talks about in that Sunstone thing, is that there is a right-wing use for this stuff. And Thaddeus Russell even kind of makes that argument a whole lot, who is somebody who tries to rescue postmodernism. But it actually is like a good underdog thing. Like, as soon as you can almost kind of tell who the underdog is by how well the postmodern arguments start working for them. And I've always kind of argued that, like, the hegemony flipped sometime in our life, that it was once kind of like Christian and right-wing dominant, but it's flipped. And just like you and I, we were talking about before this, like, people like John Stewart or whatever, they were the underdogs talking truth to the power, and now they are the minions of power. And you were saying just the same thing about the kid from the Never-Ending Story. He's the underdog who's going to save the day, but at the same time too, he could then use that luck dragon to become a tyrant.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And one of the things that's
well, he does. He already enacts his tyranny.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's totally already in the movie. It's already right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. Like, that movie is like precise. Like, every part of that movie's got like precise little points to it.
Right.
The nothing is there. He's got to retell the story, but then he can become the tyrant. And one of the things that I saw brought up in this other area, and we were talking about it with John DeLynn, Flip and I were yesterday. John DeLynn was talking about, we're David and Goliath, and we always kind of joke and laugh that they point to the $100 billion to say that they're Goliath and these guys are David. But, like, in the world, we already know now that we're in a new era where social credit is bigger than dollars, and the way they do this type of aggression that's gotten huge on social. Peterson talked about it just recently on his Cambridge. This one he talked about getting disinvited from the Cambridge thing. He talked with those guys about the totalitarianism of this type of social aggression, and how that wields more power than any. And even the the Lynn and them brag about it, that they're able to use it and wield it, although they still kind of talk like they're the underdogs. But
yeah, I mean, think about it. The mama bear, you don't think, I mean, is probably one of the like iconic animals in the world that you just don't freaking screw around with.
yeah,
You
and
don't
it's
get
especially
close
scary if
to
they're
it.
infantilizing the wrong things and they're deciding that the wrong people who aren't predators are predators.
Yeah.
They compare themselves in that to David and Goliath. The kid becomes the tyrant. What happened to David in the Bible? Like David's the exact point of it. He once was David to Goliath, but then David became the king
Yeah.
and absolute, all that power.
Right. Yeah,
It,
exactly.
and I think we are wrapping up. So let's just show this last little thing Kevin and I have been talking about here. It's funny because James Lindsay actually mentioned this on his last podcast at the end of it. He hadn't ever connected the Never-Ending Story. And you and I have been connecting the Never-Ending Story to this for a long time. In fact, a lot of people don't have good terms for what Peterson calls the postmodern neo-Marxism or whatever, and then you get all the pedants trying to argue against that. I've always called it...
This is the first thing that Chris ever said to me when because I didn't know anything about postmodernism. The very first thing that he told me what it was that it is the nothing.
Yep, and I always described it and used it as the nothing. And James Lindsay said it was the first time he'd ever heard and thought of it because he'd forgotten about the movie. But I think I wasn't internet enough or on Twitter enough to say it, but I would dare say that I coined it. I started calling it the nothing before.
I've never heard anybody else call it that.
Yeah.
You're the only person, and it's like completely.
Because part of postmodernism is you can't name it. You can't, but it is the thing that tears down story.
Right.
This whole thing, this whole movie was talking about it. This is all Jungian. It comes from Jungian concepts and archetypes.
Right.
And just like those same types of things that we're saying, maybe Joseph Smith hit on about the foundations, or maybe the King David hit on about the little kid that could becoming the tyrant. And like I said, that's in here in this movie. But Kevin and I have talked about this too. You feel like you're a big, strong person, and maybe we can hold this down and we can hold the foundations. We can be the rock,
They look like big, good, strong hands, don't they? I always thought that's what they were. Oh, my little friends. The little man with his racing snail, the nighthawk, even the stupid bat. I couldn't hold on to them. The nothing pulled them right out of my hands. I failed.
No, you didn't fail. I'm the one who failed. I was the one chosen to stop the nothing. But I lost the Auryn. I can't find my luck dragon. So I won't be able to get beyond the boundaries of Fantasia.
Listen. The nothing will be here any minute. I will just sit here and let it take me away too. They look like good, strong hands, don't they?
It's all about wiping away foundations. And then how do they beat it? They name things, and they point at things, and it's back.
They socially construct.
They socially construct. They get back to almost the beginning of the Bible. They start deciphering what the names of different things are, and giving categories. The stuff that you're not supposed to do.
Starting to build hierarchies.
Starting to build hierarchies. Starting to put foundations down and laying them out, and then you decide the story again, and maybe the story's a little bit fantastical. It's Fantasia, but there's foundation.
But yet at the same time, that's the thing that I like about Peterson, because it's like, he even now, he'll, if you ask him if he believes in God, he doesn't necessarily He doesn't. He hates that question. But the thing that I always found interesting is that he always said that he said that he acts as if he believes.
Mm-hmm.
He acts as if he believes, and that these stories are more real than anything. So that's the thing, is it's like, yeah, can you physically, empirically prove that these things are true? No.
But that's where you get to the pragmatic definition of truth, which was the whole long debate
Correct.
between him
and Sam Harris
for all that
Yep.
time. And the point that Peterson was trying to point him to was the pragmatist point, is that we have these guiding lights and these things that are usually through stories that have foundations in them that they seem to touch on something. And the way we test them is they crash against reality. As I talked about with the Midnight Mormons, is what's the future? Is the future Star Trek? No, the future is probably going to be some sort of a high demand religion, because they actually, in their fantastical way, still deal with reality better than the rationalists do.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that every individual rationalist, like an individual rationalist can just be hardcore, like, I'm just going to follow what's true and what makes sense and what makes, like Flip as an individual is going to be fine. But the society is the hard rationalists. All we ever have are failed versions of it. And we keep saying, well, no, maybe it'll work this time. You know what I mean? But my guess is we'll either dwindle in disbelief, to use a religious term, or we'll crash and burn and run ourselves, Sodom and Gomorrah ourselves right off, turn into the rat utopia. And the ending side of the rat utopia, what's on the other side of it, is complete civilizational breakdown.
Yep.
And then that's what usually happens. Like, it was brought up this week that what happened
Tower of Babel, man.
Tower of Babel, nobody can understand and talk to each other.
Yeah.
The separation happens. And it happened in Mao's CCP, that he divided and conquered. And usually what happens is, when we all become the donkeys on Pleasure Island, is that we can then be made into slaves easier.
Yep.
And I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist or a religious person. Oh, it's so horrible. We're watching it all happen before our eyes.
Yep.
Once again, the Bible is not what happened, it's what happens.
Yep.
The cycle of pride happens. And I think I can, and so I've been saying all along, you can make a case for it secularly, but sometimes you can only describe it religiously. But the problem is the reason the secular case is there is because it's happening. It's in reality.
Yep.
And we're gonna crash into the rocks. Reality bats last. It's gonna happen. And then Kevin and I are just hoping that we don't get thrown into gulags long enough to be able to say, see?
And I'll look over at you and be like, Chris,
we get to say, see?
Such good, strong hands.
Yeah, we look like good, strong hands. And then we can say, but at least we were right. We're lonely, but we're right. To use a Ben Folds 5 song. I'm lonely, but I'm right.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? I think that about sums it up. Any final words?
No, I think that's everything that I wanted to say.
All right, catch you in the gulag.
All right. Well, peace out.
Later.